Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to episode 4 of the CAV Sports Podcast. I am your host, Chris. Now, I know the setup is a little bit different. I am not where I'm usually at right now. I'm actually visiting family today for the holiday season, just to let y'all know. And a late happy holidays to everybody, and hope you all had a great time. New Year's is just around the corner. Ooh, sorry, the light is a little bright. That's what I was missing. All right. Got the light going. Got a whole new setup. I know you guys see the new microphone. We have a light now the for the podcast today, and it's very exciting. I want to give a special shout out to my family that helped me get this new equipment, so I can stop using just regular headphones that I've been currently using, like the AirPods or some other stuff that I've been using. So big thank you to them. They're also some of my biggest supporters, along with other close family and friends that are supportive of this podcast. So thank you to you guys for the equipment. It looks great. It looks professional. Now we have a new light. It's not so dark in here anymore. So now let's get started with episode 4. We have a lot to talk about today. First off, probably the biggest news of the day: Nathaniel Hackett, head coach for the Denver Broncos, has been fired after a 4-11 season, and this is his only season. And it's not a shocker, to be honest. I think it was kind of expected by everybody that he was possibly going to get fired unless he turned the season around, and he just didn't. He did not turn the season around. They had such promise on paper. They're supposed to be one of the best teams in the NFL this season. You know, giving Russell Wilson all that money, giving him a big time extension on top of that, and it just fell apart. Sadly for Nathaniel Pickett, and he has to be the head of blame here. There were instances, throughout this season where Nathaniel Hackett just showed he's not ready to become a head coach. Maybe offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, maybe something like that. But he was not ready, as you can obviously see how the season played out. He was supposed to be the head coach. Now, I don't fully blame Nathaniel Hackett for everything. I think he's a big part of the problem. Don't get me wrong. He's not, there's no exclusions out of this. But I also think that Russell Wilson was kind of part of the problem. He got all this guaranteed money, this big contract, and an extension, and he has not played like Russell Wilson should be, not like the former, possible MVP candidate, not the Super Bowl MVP possible player, that Super Bowl caliber quarterback that he's supposed to be a top 10 quarterback in the league. He did not play like that this season. So I think some of the blame for the Denver Broncos failing this season is Russell Wilson, but I think a big part of it is Nathaniel Hackett, just because of the way he's managed games. There were times where he just looked confused, and it's obviously reflected onto the team. As you can see, like with Russell Wilson, as he plays, at this point in the season, he just looks lost. You can just see it kind of watching a little bit of the Rams and Broncos game, which we're going to talk about that game later on today. You can just tell Russell Wilson was just lost, and there's no way around that. And Nathaniel Hackett wasn't helping. So hopefully the Denver Broncos can get it fixed next season. We're just not sure, but the whole Broncos country, let's ride. I'm sorry, I have to give this a try. I'm sorry, guys. Maybe next season. Maybe next season. Now, this next topic I want to talk about, it's not really something that's like breaking news. It's just more of like a question that kind of popped up to me earlier this week. And it's Lamar Jackson, the quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens. He's been missing games because of an injury. And one of the big questions that popped up was, if Lamar Jackson's injury is, still injured, should he just sit out the rest of the season? Now, for those of you that know or that don't know, he's up for a contract. This is his contract year. The Baltimore Ravens is playing hardball with Lamar Jackson, which is, and I don't know why they just won't at least try to make a deal with Lamar Jackson. And there have been some people out there saying that maybe he should sit out the rest of the season. Prove a point. Prove the point that they need Lamar Jackson to at least get to the playoffs. And I don't think that's incorrect. I really don't. Lamar Jackson's probably like their best player on offense for sure. Their most athletic player on the roster, and that's hands down like a fact for the Baltimore Ravens. But I think with him sitting out, this would have had to be if they had a season like the Broncos. If they were 4-11, not going to the playoffs, they've been eliminated from contention. Then I would consider Lamar Jackson sitting out and, like, okay, well, I'm going to sit out because I'm not going to risk getting further injured for a team that's not even going to make the playoffs, which isn't true. The Baltimore Ravens are in the playoffs right now. They've clinched a spot in the playoffs. So it's not like they're not going anywhere. That's not true. Do I think they'll get farther with Lamar playing? Of course, they are. As you can see, for the past 2 weeks, I believe that he has not played. They have been struggling to move the ball, and some of it's because his star players that he has at the wide receiver just isn't there anymore. Rashad Bateman's out for the year. Mark Andrews was injured for a good part, so all he's been relying on is his running game and himself running the ball and throwing to wide receivers that are kind of, there to help out as much as they can. But obviously, his big target is Mark Andrews. Now, with his injury and the way he plays, and I believe it's a knee injury, he needs to be careful, for sure. He needs to take less risks and less hits because that is a great way to, number one, not get your contract because you're going to get hurt even more. And the Baltimore Ravens are not going to want to give somebody that big of a contract if they're not going to be able to play him. And that just logically doesn't make any sense. Why would we give a big time contract to a player that's very injury prone? And we've seen that other organizations in the NFL that have given big contracts to players that are injury prone, how that's biting them the butt. A big example is the Arizona Cardinals. They gave Kyler Murray, who was being petty with the Cardinals, took down all their posts, unfollowed them. They were freaking out because he was about to move away, and they gave him his big contract, and he was hurt for most of the season. They had to rely mostly on Colt McCoy. And I believe this week they relied on Trace McSorley because Colt McCoy could not play. But they don't have that star quarterback in Arizona, and it's just, I'm starting to see it's becoming the same situation in Baltimore. The only difference is that Baltimore has not given Lamar Jackson his money, and for an organization, I believe that's pretty smart because that way they don't run that risk of if Lamar Jackson does get hurt, they're gonna have a problem. But when you have someone that was a unanimous MVP, he's gotten to the playoffs. I believe he won a playoff game. There's no way you can't pay him his money, or at least strike some sort of deal with him. Maybe if he doesn't get that Deshaun Watson contract, but at least guarantee him a pretty substantial amount of time and substantial amount of money. I think both parties would be happy. Now, like I said before, Deshaun Watson, his contract with the Cleveland Browns has ultimately broke the quarterback ceiling for money paid because now they're saying well, if I'm at least a little bit reliable or at least good enough to be a top 10, top 20 quarterback, I'm going to get paid money and big money. And now we're going to see that trend with all NFL starting quarterbacks at least, that they're going to be wanting that high paid money because they're helping their team at least either get to playoffs or helping them have a good record to have a chance in the playoffs. And that's what Deshaun Watson has done. And now we're seeing that with Lamar Jackson because he's seeing that, Deshaun Watson didn't even play majority of this season, and he has all that guaranteed money the Browns are promising him. The Packers just gave Aaron Rodgers a big contract, and there's probably more that's coming. Joe Burrow is about to he's probably going to get a pretty big contract. Justin Herbert, I don't think he should get one, or at least not a really big contract, but Justin Herbert's probably going to get a contract. And, we saw Dak Prescott get one, and, he's top 10. Lamar Jackson's a little more athletic than him, so he can do a little bit more. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes got his money. Josh Allen's going to get his money. So Lamar Jackson's asking himself, well, why should I not get my money? And on top of that, I am risking more further injury, and that can ultimately hurt his skill set and what he does in the games. Because a big part of what he does is runs around in the pocket. He can run the RPOs. He can run the read options, the speed options. He can, break away from the pocket, extend it with his legs, or go get the first down. He has enough speed to do that, and obviously with a little bit of his arm strength that he has, he can make those plays. And with all that, if he starts injuring his knee a lot, and there's not guaranteed or at least some kind of money involved, because he's injuring himself and he's potentially going to take away that skill set of his game, and now there's a problem. So I do think that was an interesting question with if Lamar should sit out the rest of the season. I believe they would if they were having the season the Broncos were having. If they were not going to make the playoffs, they're out, it's set and done, next season, then I would for sure sit out. I would, rest up. You got to get ready for next season. Now you've shown that the Baltimore Ravens need you, but they don't have that kind of season. They're going into the playoffs, so he's going to get paid for going to the playoffs regardless. So he's going to get some sort of incentive for that. But I think more of where the money problem's coming in is that he's injuring his knee. It's taking away from his skill set of his game. Now you need to make sure, well, I'm gonna get my money because I'm the one putting, my athleticism on the line. My knee is getting hurt, and I'm not really working with so much talent that I have to carry the show most of the time outside of Mark Andrews. So I think that Lamar Jackson shouldn't sit out, especially if they're going to playoffs. Now, I do think he should rest. If they're already clinched a spot in the playoffs, then I would rest Lamar Jackson until you go to playoffs. Until you guys figure out who you're going to be playing come January, then I would play Lamar Jackson. But right now, I don't think the Ravens are in a hurry to start Lamar. They are not in the hunt. They're not, trying to fight for their division because the Bengals have clinched it. But they are in the playoffs, so if they want at least a little help from Lamar in come playoff time, then I would say let him sit until playoffs. But do I think he should sit out the rest of the season and miss playoffs? No, I really don't, because he's going to be their best chance of going. Obviously, the other two quarterbacks, Huntley and I'm blanking on the third string quarterback. Obviously, they're not the answer, and we can clearly tell. Lamar Jackson gives the Baltimore Ravens a better chance at least making it far into the playoffs. So Lamar Jackson, I believe he should sit at least until playoff time and then go from there. But the Baltimore Ravens organization, you guys got to cut a deal with him. You guys got to get him some kind of incentive, some kind of deal going. If not, I mean, he bet on himself this season, and I believe that he's proved. I don't know what else more he needs to prove aside of maybe a Super Bowl, but unanimous MVP. He's gone to playoffs. He's set these records. He gives your team the best chance to win. I would at least start talking to management and saying we need to at least get him to stay, to think about staying before Lamar come off season decides, hey, I want to trade. I want to get out of here. Because clearly you guys do not value my skill set. You're not giving me the kind of financial aid that I need, especially with something like this. So the Baltimore Ravens, I highly advise you guys get a deal with him done before another team comes up with a bigger salary cap and just starts offering you guys a trade for Lamar Jackson. All right, so next up, I want to talk about another big event that's happening this upcoming weekend, the college football playoffs. That's right. The top 4 teams in the NCAA are going head-to-head. So number 2 and 3, 2 and 3, Michigan and TCU, and then 1 and 4, Georgia and the Ohio State University. So first up, I want to talk about the matchup TCU and Michigan, which I'm very excited for. I think that's probably going to be one of the better games of this upcoming weekend. So to kind of give you guys a little bit of background between the two universities, Michigan has a third-ranked defense, which is pretty impressive in the college football world. And compared to that, TCU has a 74th ranked defense, which is not bad, top 100, but it could be better. But here's where things get a little interesting. TCU has a 15th ranked offense, though. Michigan only has 27th. So what I think this is going to come down to is probably defense, is where the big plays are going to be made. Because between J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback for Michigan, and Max Duggan, between those two quarterbacks, I would take Max Duggan. Just because he's showed the most heart in college football. His story with his heart condition, he wasn't even supposed to play this year. And then, he came off the bench after, I believe, the original starter. He got hurt and he couldn't go. He came off and led TCU to the Big 12 title and a near-perfect season. So I think between Max and JJ, I would definitely take Max Duggan because he's going to put the team on his back when they need him the most. And clearly everyone saw it against Kansas State in the Big 12 title when he pulled off a miraculous 90-yard run to set them up for overtime, and they lost the Big 12 championship by an inch, which is a killer, especially for him working that hard and, putting the little team on his back to to put his team in a position to win the game, which is just very heartbreaking. But now with Michigan, though, I cannot say that they have not, pulled it off either. They upset Ohio State earlier this season to clinch their spot. Now, with that, though, I will give Michigan this. Ohio State is a really good team. I believe I have some of their stats right here for the Georgia matchup. They were 7th ranked in offense, and they are ranked 11th on defense. So it's not like Michigan, is something to sleep over because they knocked off, C.J. Stroud, who was a Heisman finalist, and a really good defense and a really good passing game. So we cannot take away that from Michigan. So I wouldn't really rule out them just because they've shown that they've shown and proved that they can play and they belong in the playoffs this season. And Harbaugh's been working hard to get to the playoffs. He's been working really, really hard to get in the playoffs this year, and he finally got it with his team. And I want to say another thing that's pretty impressive though is JJ McCarthy he could step up. I believe he was the one, and I stand behind on this. JJ McCarthy was the one that beat Ohio State. They won without their top running back in Borom. I forgot his name. I'm sorry. But JJ McCarthy stepped up when they needed him the most, and he outplayed a Heisman finalist. So I think the Horned Frogs need to keep that in mind. I know they have a top tier running game, I believe, over there in Michigan. But JJ McCarthy is also not a quarterback to sleep on because he knocked off a Heisman finalist who was projected to win that game. I believe Ohio State was projected to was like a 6-point or 3-point what's it called. They had the advantage over Michigan, and Michigan came up big. McCarthy outplayed that C.J. Stroud, so I think TCU needs to keep that in mind when they go into this matchup with Michigan. That J.J. McCarthy is not a scrub himself. He's not a game manager. He's not just a guy that have a quarterback. He can play, and I think TCU needs to keep that in mind when they go into this matchup. And another reason why I think defense is going to have to come up big for TCU and Michigan, why they're going to be the crucial point in this game, is because earlier this season, TCU, whenever they faced off against top-ranked teams and Max Duggan didn't play good, a big example would probably be the Texas game. Their defense was able to hold B.J. Robinson, one of the top running backs in the NCAA. He's probably going to be, I believe he's a top 1 or 2 running back going into the draft this year. And they were able to hold him down. And I believe they forced fumbles and turnovers. Quentin Ewers, the top recruit that transferred from Ohio State to Texas, they were able to hold him below his average numbers. Not even Alabama was doing that, if you really think about it. Because when Texas went up against Alabama, Quentin Ewers was throwing all over that Bama defense. And Nick Saban was getting frustrated, and you can see it. So prior to Ewers going down in that game, it looked like Texas was about to knock off the number 1 team in the country. If Quentin Ewers never got hurt, that would have happened. But when Texas went up against TCU, that TCU defense was able to hold the 2 top players for Texas in B.J. Robinson, the top running back in the NFL class this year, and Quentin Ewers, who's going to be a real good quarterback coming probably in the next couple of years, and also he's probably going to be a top pick in the NFL once he gets ready to go and make the move over. And that's just something that TCU has under their belt. And also another game I want to bring up for the TCU Horned Frogs was the Iowa State game. Iowa State, their defense is actually ranked higher than Michigan's. TCU was ranked the number 6 defense in the whole country. And TCU was able to drop 40 points, I believe, or more on Iowa State, and then the TCU defense held the Iowa State offense, who they're not as good as their defense, but Iowa State's defense, on the other hand, was pretty good this year, and they were ranked number 6, which is higher than Michigan, and I believe they're higher than Georgia. So I'm not knocking out that TCU is gonna have a hard time against this defense. I do apologize. Michigan is actually ranked higher than Iowa State, but more to my point is that TCU can go up against these top defenses, and they can move the ball effectively, which is what I think TCU is going to need. But I also believe that their defense is going to have to step up against J.J. McCarthy in that run game if they're going to have any chance to knock off Michigan. But like I said earlier, when we first started the segment, that's going to be the game I'm most excited about because it's going to be 2 teams that are right there neck and neck, and I believe statistically these teams are about even. I really do. I think that a TCU offense with Max Duggan, they believe in Duggan, and they are going to be able to go toe-to-toe with that number 3 defense in Michigan. But I also think J.J. McCarthy is a good enough quarterback to get past that TCU defense. So it's going to be a great matchup, and I think these are the 2 most equal teams in the playoffs right now. But I will give you guys my pick for the playoffs come at the end of this podcast when I do my other picks for the NFL. But now we're going to go up to the next matchup. Number 1 and number 4, Georgia and The Ohio State University. So to kind of bring up some of their rankings, Like I said, Ohio State is the seventh ranked offense, while Georgia is number 8. And on defense, Ohio State is ranked 11th, while Georgia is 8th. Now, I've said this before, and I'll stand by it. Georgia University is probably the most complete college football team this year. As you can see, they're both evenly ranked in both offense and defense. That's why I was strong headed on why Stetson Bennett should have not won the Heisman, because they have a top ranked running game and a top ranked receiving core. So it was like an AJ McCarron situation a few years ago with Alabama. He got ranked for a Heisman finalist. Wasn't because he was a good quarterback. It was because he was on a really good team. Now, I'm not saying that Stetson Bennett is AJ McCarron. No, I think Stetson Bennett was probably better than AJ McCarron when he was in Alabama. I'm just saying that he has a complete team. He was never put in a situation this season where he had to dig deep and come from behind. Most of the games that Georgia played this year, I believe there was no opponent that was within 7 points of him. I believe the closest one was like 17 or 21. I forgot which number it was. But Georgia has been blowing out their opponents this season. A big example is that LSU got their butts kicked by Georgia in the SEC title game. So I will stand firmly behind that. Georgia has the most complete team, I believe, in college football right now, just because of their high-ranked offense and their high-ranked defense. Stetson Bennett, I believe, is also a good quarterback. He was a Heisman finalist this year, but they have never gone through that adversity. They have dominated everyone they played this year, but Ohio State is not going to be a pushover either. Ohio State, I know they snuck their way in back into the playoffs with USC losing to Utah in their title matchup, and they were able to get in and squeeze on in. But CJ Stroud is not a pushover either. I know I mentioned earlier that he did lose to JJ McCarthy with Michigan, but other than that, he played. He had a great season. I believe aside of 2 games, which is Northwestern, and I'm blanking on the next game, which is where he had a really bad outing, which I believe actually was the Michigan game. And Northwestern and Michigan was the 2 games he just did not have a good outing with for him. That honestly hurt his Heisman chances. And I said this in the Heisman Trophy episode, and that was if CJ Stroud had one of those Heisman Trophy moments, I believe he would have won the Heisman. He would have won the Heisman over Caleb Williams. But he didn't have one of those games. But now he lost the Heisman for a second year in a row, because he was a finalist last season, I believe. And now this year he did not win, but he's in the playoffs and he has a chance to prove himself. And that's going to be pretty big for him. And I believe this will be his I should have won the Heisman moment if he can go up against this 8th ranked defense. Now, with that though, they do have the 7th ranked offense. So I think the defense and the offense between Georgia and Ohio State is going to be a pretty incredible one, because those are top 10 teams that can move the ball and stuff the run and pass. So it's going to be a pretty interesting matchup, I believe, on that department. But I honestly don't think that Ohio State's defense is going to stop Stetson Bennett, which is probably going to be the Achilles heel for the Buckeyes, is because Stetson Bennett, that receiving core, and their run game is just going to be way too much, in my opinion. They, like I said, though, that the running backs alone were killing the SEC, and then adding on top of that Stetson Bennett's incredible passing season with that top-notch receiving core, that might be a little bit too much for Ohio State. And that's actually what I was saying for TCU, if they're going to have a chance to get to the national title game, is that if they don't play Georgia. Because all the roads are going to lead to Georgia. Obviously, that's kind of what everyone's pick has been. Aside of Alabama, it might have been all roads lead to Georgia. Now, Ohio State has a chance to knock them off, but I do like the matchup between Ohio State's offense and Georgia's defense. I think that's going to be, pretty blockbuster. But that Ohio State defense, I don't know if they'll have an answer for Stetson Bennett. That's just going to be an interesting game to watch this weekend, and keep an eye on that. But I will also get to my pick on who's going to win that game and who's going to go to the national title. All right, so next up, some NFL games that caught my eye this weekend. There was quite a few, actually, and we got to start with the first one and the obvious one. How about them Cowboys knocking off the best team in the NFL this past Saturday. Yes, everyone, round of applause. A round of applause. They won 40-34 against the Philadelphia Eagles in Arlington. Now, to kind of give you guys some of the stats for the game, Dak Prescott threw for 27 for 35, 347 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Gardner Minshew was 24 for 40, 355 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Now, I want to get this started with, how Dak Prescott and the offense played. If I had to give him a score out of 10, I would actually give him a 10 out of 10. Because if you take away the pick six, that's about almost a 2-3 possession game. For sure, 2 possessions. If you take away the interception and the pick six Dak threw in the beginning of the game. But the reason why I give him a 10, not because of, they're high scoring, but it's because they were able to rebound off the turnover. I believe after the interception, Dak was going up and down the offensive sideline. He was saying, "That's on me. That one's on me. That's my fault, but let's answer." And I believe Dak Prescott on the offense was able to do that this past Saturday. They were able to pass the ball through the air, and it's not like the Philadelphia Eagles have a bad defense. They have one of the top defenses in the league this year. Their team altogether is top notch. So it's not like their defense is a pushover, because they were getting sacks. They got a pick six. They were forcing breakups. They have the best cornerback duo in the NFL with Darius Slay, and I believe it's I forgot the other guy's name. I'm so sorry, but I'm blanking on him. But I do know that they right now have the best cornerback corners in the NFL right now. So it's not like their defense is bad. It's not that their defense alignment weren't getting to Dak Prescott. It wasn't like they were stopping the run. It was nothing like that. The Philadelphia defense was taking it to the Dallas Cowboys offense. It's just that offense was playing better. Dak Prescott was able to rebound off of the interception, and they were able to play to their hardest to knock off that defense. Now, a lot of people that I've heard after this game, and their reaction was, "You beat a backup quarterback." No, I will not let that slide with anyone, because in the beginning of the season, all the Philadelphia fans were bragging that they beat Cooper Rush. They were bragging that they beat a backup quarterback in Dallas, because Cooper Rush was on a hot streak and he was doing well, and the Philadelphia fans were raving that they knocked off the Dallas Cowboys and the backup quarterback with Cooper Rush. So I do not accept that part of anyone's argument. I get Gardner Minshew as a backup quarterback, but it's not like Gardner Minshew is some backup quarterback that's never played before. He was a starter in Jacksonville. He had some success in Jacksonville. And he's probably the best backup quarterback this season with the Philadelphia Eagles. And it shows that that they have an offense that can run with anyone. Now we're seeing that it's the system that Sirianni has in place for that Philadelphia team, that it can work with anybody. And we're clearly seeing that. Because obviously with Jalen Hurts, he's had an MVP season. And then he went down, and now Gardner Minshew comes in. Gardner Minshew, this backup quarterback that everyone is saying, don't get on your high horse, Cowboys fans. You beat a backup quarterback. This backup quarterback passed for almost 400 yards. 400 yards. And so you can't say it's the backup quarterback, because the backup quarterback didn't play like Russell Wilson did this past week. He didn't play bad. He was moving the ball. And this is another thing. The Dallas Cowboys defense never forced Gardner Minshew to punt at all that game. They never punted, nor did they get a sack. So they cannot say that, well, he's a backup quarterback, because that backup quarterback was, first of all, a starter, and he's able to run that offense clearly effectively. So it might be just Sirianni's system, but you can't knock that away from Gardner Minshew. You just can't. And that's why the Dallas Cowboys were so focused on this game. Even with Gardner Minshew, they still saw how well that system ran with Gardner instead of Jalen Hurts. So this argument of, well, it's a backup quarterback, no, I will not accept it, because that backup quarterback still passed for 355 yards. That backup quarterback was a starter in Jacksonville when he first came into the league. That backup quarterback is probably the best backup in the NFL right now, and obviously we've seen it. And now we see that he can run Sirianni's offense. Maybe they can't do as much as Jalen Hurts. They can't do the bootlegs or, the read options on 3rd and inches, and, he can pull it and run it like Jalen Hurts can. But obviously they could set up a game plan for Gardner Minshew to set him up to be successful. Him and Devontae Smith were killing that Dallas defense. And now let's actually talk about the Dallas defense, because I believe they were the weakest link in this game. Because, as I said, they did not have a sack. Micah Parsons was not a factor in that game. Trayvon Diggs was getting burnt and torched like crazy in this game with A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown was making him spin in circles. I'm surprised they didn't go to A.J. Brown more. I believe sometimes he had a little bit of an injury, or he got nicked in the leg or something. But he was torching, and he was just making Trayvon Diggs look silly. The Pro Bowl selected corner in Trayvon Diggs, he didn't look like a Pro Bowler against A.J. Brown. And then Devontae Smith was torching, Kelvin Joseph and those other cornerbacks over there on the other side of the defense. So with the Dallas Cowboys defensive line not getting home, and we clearly saw that, they were not getting the pressures that they need to be able to win, get Gardner Minshew off the field and, give the offense a chance to try to, pull the lead away. That defense was not stopping the Eagles. So Dan Quinn needs to come up with something else, because that defensive line has now been non-existent for the past few games, and there's only so much that the offense can do to bail you out, and you can't rely that Dak may have another game like that. I believe this is probably Dak Prescott's best game this season. I do personally believe that, and you can't rely he's going to have another one of those again if you have to go up against Philadelphia and if you have to go up against Jalen Hurts. Now, do I think that the Cowboys maybe lose if Jalen Hurts might have played? I believe that's a possibility. That's why I said in the last episode, if Jalen Hurts doesn't play, I will take the Cowboys. And I believe after they announced Jalen Hurts was not going to play, the Cowboys became had the 3-point advantage, and I believe the Eagles were like a 3-point underdog, which is still very shocking. But if Jalen Hurts plays, I believe we were not going to win, because clearly that defense was non-existent against Philadelphia, and I would not want to go into a shootout with Philadelphia with how well that offense is run. One of the biggest indicators that I knew that we have an issue, or that we're gonna have to fix something, is I believe they ran a play with that was Devontae Smith's first touchdown. And Gardner Minshew, they did like a fake screen to Dallas Goedert. So Dallas Goedert ran to the left, ran a fake screen. So what Devontae Smith did was act like he was going to block Trayvon, and then he kind of, bailed away to get open, which is a fake screen. So Trayvon, instead of following his man, because it looked like it was man-to-man defense, he bit to try to, either undercut Dallas Goedert or to get an interception or stop him. He let the trail man and Devontae Smith get wide open into the end zone and score the touchdown. And that's when I knew that there's an issue, or that Trayvon Diggs is going to have to probably abandon that, that quick jump kind of play that he does. I know he's a ball hawk. He has wide receiver skills. He came in to Alabama being a wide receiver, and then he moved over to corner. But when you have that crazy of an offense that Sirianni runs, you have to be very disciplined. And it was just evident that he wasn't. He was trying to make the big plays too much. He was trying to undercut wide receivers. He was trying to be in the right place at the right time. He thought, well, the play's coming here. But then, Devontae Smith sneaks right behind him, and he's wide open for a touchdown. And now now the Eagles are back in the game, where they're starting to pull away. And once you go up against an offense like Sirianni's, I think that's the one thing you have to do, and that's what I believe the Commanders did when they beat the Eagles, was that they have to stay disciplined. Stick to your assignments and stick to them. Don't try to be the hero here. Don't try to be the person that I want to make the big play. I want to be the person that stops this offense. No. I believe that they have to stay disciplined, because when you go up against an offense like that runs so many motions, they do a lot of guard pooling. They do a lot of crazy plays, a lot of tricks that you have to stay disciplined. That's just something that you're going to have to do. If your assignment is man-on-man defense, you stick with the wide receiver. I remember this was an old saying from a coach of mine whenever I played. It was if that receiver has to go to the bathroom, you were gonna you're gonna go with them, and you're gonna hold the toilet paper. That's exactly what you're gonna do. That's man-to-man defense. You are not leaving that receiver alone, and that's exactly what Trayvon Diggs didn't do. He bit on the fake screen, and that led to a touchdown. You need to stay disciplined. You need to stick to the game plan that Dan Quinn is putting together. Now, we have to move on to the Dallas defensive line though. They gotta get home. They gotta get pressures on the quarterback. You cannot give Gardner Minshew that much time in the pocket. You cannot give these kinds of quarterbacks that amount of time to go through their first read, their second read, their third read, then the check down, or you can't give them time to let the play develop, or if coverage is blown and they see it and they have time to get it open, then you can't do that. Or if they try to escape the pocket, you got to keep the contain. The defensive line needs to get bottom line better. They didn't get a sack this past game, and I believe that if they at least would have gotten 2 or 3 sacks, I think they would have been able to stump the defense. They may have been able to force Philadelphia to punt the ball. So Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, they got to figure something out because they need to get to these quarterbacks sooner rather than like right now. They need to get to these quarterbacks because if you don't get to the quarterback and the corners that we have, the corners that we have, aside of Trayvon Diggs, Kelvin Joseph is burnt. He can be burnt by wide receivers. Wright is a little bit better, but he's mad inconsistent. And then Bland is stepping up, but I don't think Bland is as good as Trayvon. He's not, a lockdown corner, and he's gonna get beat too. So if you know that you have an injured cornerback on on the other side of Trayvon Diggs, your middle linebacker in Leighton Vander Esch is hurt, which is your best run stuffer, and your safeties, if the quarterback doesn't get stacked within a certain amount of time or pressured or something, the safeties might get beat. So the defensive line needs to figure something out because they got to get home at some point in time. You got to put pressure on that quarterback. You got to make him rethink of what he's doing. You need to make him nervous on third down because if you don't and you give him time like they did with Gardner Minshew, that's how he passes for 355 yards and gets 2 touchdowns. That's how he gets people wide open, or they get to set up the play that's going to get other wide receivers open, or that's how Devontae Smith's going to have a big game. Now, I'm not going to knock on them too much because they did force 4 turnovers. I was incorrect about the interceptions on Gardner Minshew. He had 2 interceptions in this game. They did get 2 interceptions. They got 2 fumbles, bad handoffs to Miles Sanders. And the Philadelphia Eagles took him out of the game, which I thought was very shocking. I believe in the last 3-4 minutes of the game, after that second fumble, Miles Sanders did not touch the field, which I think is a little bit concerning because, I think Sirianni, he trusts Miles Sanders until that happens, or whoever's calling the offense is like, okay, we trust Miles. Miles Sanders is not a bad running back. It's just when he screws up, like when he fumbles a ball or he misses, the right gap to shoot through or something like that, or a blocking assignment, they take him out of the game. And I believe mentally he kind of takes himself out too, because when that second fumble happened, you can just see on the sideline, he's taking off, he's unbuckling his chin strap, he's frustrated with himself. You can just kind of see mentally he's not there. His confidence is kind of down, which makes sense because when when 2 fumbles happen on your account, that's very, that hurts your confidence in yourself. But when the game's on the line, you can't do that. And I think that Sirianni is seeing that with Miles Sanders, that he kind of mentally checks out, and that's what makes him not put him in the game. Now, with that though, with the defense was able to capitalize on these turnovers and then giving the ball back to the offense, and they were able, to get either field goals or touchdowns off of the turnovers, I think that was the ultimate reason why the Dallas Cowboys won. If they didn't force that many turnovers, then I believe it's going to be another issue. I believe it's a whole nother problem that the Cowboys have to deal with. Or they're going to have to score 20 points in a quarter, which is going to be hard, especially if Jalen Hurts plays. Now, with 4 turnovers, you're probably going to win the game. But that's why I was saying earlier that you cannot, you know, just say Gardner Minshew is a backup quarterback because he was still able to move the offense. Even with 4 turnovers, they had potential to win the game. They really did. It wasn't like they were out. They weren't out for the count. It wasn't, anything, to freak out about because they knew they can move against the Dallas defense. So with that, I'm going to end on this. How about them Cowboys? How about them Cowboys? Everybody. Now, we'll just have to wait and see how the rest of the season plays out, see if they can pass the Philadelphia Eagles. I believe they have the tiebreaker because they have more division wins. So we'll just have to wait and see how the rest of these last 2 weeks go. So the next game that caught my eye was the Lions and the Panthers. The Panthers would win 37-23 against the Detroit Lions. Another great game from Jared Goff, though. 25 for 42, 355 for 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Sam Darnold 250 with 1 touchdown. But here was the big gap between the Lions and the Panthers, and that the Panthers' running game was just too dominant against the Detroit defense. They were able to rack 320 total rushing yards. Foreman had 165 with the touchdown, and then Hubbard had 125 by himself and no touchdowns. And this is where the issue, I believe, is now coming up for the Detroit Lions. Their defense needs to stop the run game. I believe that's pretty evident. If you allow 300 yards on 300 rushing yards, you're probably not going to win the game. But also on the offensive side, Swift and Jamal Williams need to do something because this is an interesting fact and stat. The person that rushed the most yards this past game was Jared Goff. He ran for 15 yards and he had the most rushing yards out of everybody on that running back team. That's not good. You cannot do that unless you're Lamar Jackson. If you're Lamar Jackson, that makes a little more sense. But if you're Jared Goff, you should not be having more rushing yards than your running backs. So Jamal Williams and Swift need to pick it up. They just have to because, especially if you're trying to make that push into the playoffs, you're trying to catch the Giants and the Commanders, you got to be able to run the ball, and your defense needs to be able to stop the running game. But for the Carolina Panthers, good for them. I know they were off to a really bad start. In the beginning of the season, they looked like they were not even going to make the playoffs. But now they have a chance. They're only about a game and a half away from the Buccaneers. They need to win this week and then win the following week and hope the Buccaneers lose again to get the playoffs. So they're not out. I believe they're the Cinderella team this season. They may make wild card, they may not. They may win the division. So we're going to have to see on that game, but good for the Carolina Panthers that their season's been turned around, and especially with Matt Rule now finally being out of there. So good for the Carolina Panthers, but Detroit Lions, you can't, I'm sorry, but you can't blame Jared Goff. You just can't. He's having a great year. He has great numbers. I believe you need a little bit more from your running backs, and you need a little bit more from your defense. All right, so the next game that caught my eye was Tennessee and the Texans. The Houston Texans win their second game in the season. 2 wins this season, Houston. Good job. Tennessee, what happened to you guys? I will tell you what happened. Ryan Tannehill did not play. That's what happened. And Malik Willis, there was a lot of talk about him coming up this season, from the draft, getting picked. To me, he doesn't look like he's ready. Right now, he's not ready. And I think it doesn't help that Ryan Tannehill is not helping him, developing him into that quarterback. And I believe that's where the problem's starting to come in. Because you can clearly see the difference in play between Malik Willis and Ryan Tannehill. You can clearly see the difference between the two quarterbacks. Malik Willis, in this game against the Texans, he was 14 for 23, 99 yards passing, and 2 interceptions. You cannot play like that as a quarterback. You cannot put up those kinds of numbers and expect to win your game. I understand they have Derrick Henry, who had 126 yards on the ground and 1 touchdown. But when you get outplayed by David Mills, who went 17 for 28, 178 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception, you're not going to win your games. And Houston's defense is not something, to push around because they almost beat, the Dallas Cowboys. They've almost beat, other teams. So their defense is not bad. Obviously, their offense needs a lot of help. But when you play that poorly like Malik Willis did, you're not going to win games. I understand you have the best running back in the league in Derrick Henry. You have, that much strength on you. And I understand that he doesn't have the top, wide receivers like they did last season when they had AJ Brown. But either the quarterback room needs to develop him a lot better, or Ryan Tannehill needs to suck it up and teach him something. Because clearly, without Ryan Tannehill, they are struggling. They are struggling to be able to move the ball. Aside of their game plan of give Derrick Henry the football, they don't have much options. And I think honestly, this offseason for the Tennessee Titans, they need to get either another wide receiver because Robert Woods is not cutting it. Obviously, when AJ Brown left, their receiving game plummeted, and Derrick Henry cannot carry the ball 23, 25 plus times and expect to win because clearly they can do that. But if your quarterbacks cannot pass the ball, then what's the point? Because what do you do? Why does everybody run the ball? To throw it. But if your quarterback can't throw it, then what's there to fear? So Malik Willis, I don't believe he's the answer yet. I don't think he's the answer yet. But I think the Tennessee Titans need to do something. They need to teach him because clearly Ryan Tannehill is letting him sink or swim. And right now, Malik Willis is sinking and sinking fast. I just don't want Malik Willis to end up being one of those quarterbacks that just didn't work out in the NFL. Because I don't think that's him. And I hardly doubt that that's going to be his career. I just believe that Tannehill is a little butthurt that they went to go get him in the draft instead of believing in him after giving him a sufficient contract. So that's just all I have to say about the Tennessee Titans. You guys, someone's got to help Malik Willis, either teach him or mentor him, get somebody in there to help him out because Ryan Tannehill is clearly not doing it, and Derrick Henry's running ability is not enough. And because of this play, and because of Ryan Tannehill being out and Malik Willis not being what he's supposed to be, they are not in the number one seed anymore in the AFC South. The Jaguars have now catapulted themselves to first, and now they may make the playoffs. So this is just hurting the Tennessee Titans more and more. That's all this is doing. It's not helping them. Ryan Tannehill is not just, helping himself. He is hurting the team. Because when stuff like this happens, when you get injured, guess who's the next person up? It's the backup quarterback you refuse to help. He's next. And if you're really content with Tennessee failing because you don't want to help out this quarterback, then I believe that you're kind of the problem here. Then you're kind of the bad apple in this team. Because clearly he does not want to help Malik Willis. He is telling him either figure it out or figure it out. And he has not figured it out. And that's a problem. Because he's a young quarterback. He's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not Peyton Manning that could figure it out right away. He's not Andrew Luck. He's not, he's not RG3 who was able to figure out his first season. He's not. You need to be able to help him and be flexible because he is probably going to be the future of the Tennessee Titans. And just because you're upset that they picked him and they may think that you might leave or they don't believe in you or they're ready to have someone on board, he kind of pulled a page out of Aaron Rodgers' playbook, basically. Kind of how Aaron Rodgers was so mad that Jordan Love got drafted in the first round, even though the Packers were just preparing in case he retires or anything bad happens to him, they have the backup quarterback needed. And I believe he took it personally, and now the Tennessee Titans are suffering because of it. All right, so the next game that caught my eye is the Rams and the Broncos. First of all, Broncos country, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that this is happening to you. It hurts my heart It hurts my heart when that happens, It really does. Hurts my heart that you guys are, 4-11 and have no head coach anymore. Sorry, wrong button. But the LA Rams pulled off the win 51-14. Now, Russ, I don't know what's going on with Russell Wilson this season. Like, there is no excuse, there's no way to explain what is going on with him. Because these were his numbers in his game. Russell Wilson was 15 for 27 with 214 passing yards, 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions. Baker Mayfield, who is on his third team, and I believe this is week 3 with his new team under Sean McVay, he passed for 24 for 28, 230 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then on top of that, the defense for the Denver Broncos made Cam Akers look like Eric Dickerson. That's just what he looked like. Because I believe, let's see, right here. Sorry, I thought I wrote it down, but I know Cam Akers rushed for over 100 yards. And actually, before heading into the game, the Rams were a 3-point underdog. The Broncos were projected to win against the LA Rams, who have a shot offensive line because they are running with backups. They're running with backup wide receivers. The only one that's a starter that's on that offense is Tyler Higbee, who had a big game. Baker Mayfield's probably going to be the backup quarterback to Matthew Stafford, and Matthew Stafford is just out for the rest of the season. Cam Akers doesn't even want to be there anymore. He was asking for a trade earlier this season after getting benched for Henderson, who got traded, by the way, which I didn't understand that logic. So the Broncos lost that bad to a team that is running on no Cooper Kupp, no Aaron Donald, no good running back, an offensive line that is broken, no Allen Robinson. They had to go get Baker Mayfield in waiver claims. This is his third week with the team, and they lost that bad of a margin. Now, with that though, with the Broncos doing that bad, this just ultimately led to Nathaniel Hackett getting fired. Because that is embarrassing to watch. That is just a heartbreaker, and you hate to see it happen to the Denver Broncos. But I think that they may have to consider that Russell Wilson's part of the problem here. As I said earlier, Nathaniel Hackett obviously takes the majority of the blame here. He has to. He's the head coach. No adjustments, nothing. But Russell Wilson needs to take some kind of fault here. There was a video that surfaced on the sideline where the offensive lineman pushed the backup quarterback. He was not even the one playing in the game. He wasn't the one that threw those 3 interceptions. He wasn't the one, turning the ball over, not converting on third down. But the offensive linemen were pushing the poor backup quarterback for the Denver Broncos. I'm like, no, go confront Russell Wilson. Go confront that million dollar man, number 3, who has all that guaranteed money and an extension, and confront him on why he is not playing good. That is something that the Denver Broncos locker room should go point the finger at, not go push the poor backup, and he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't. He really, really didn't. But they went and shoved him because of frustration, and I think that just wraps up the Denver Broncos season this year. They're fighting with each other. Obviously, they're not, connecting well. Russell Wilson, I think he's just making more enemies than friends in Denver at this point, isolating himself. They're blaming the wrong quarterback. It's just disaster. It's chaos over there in Denver. But now, moving on to the LA Rams, this is promising, and here's why. Because Sean McVay went on record to say that he likes Baker Mayfield, and I think now he believes in Baker Mayfield. That's why they went to go get him. I believe whenever they first signed him in waivers, he told reporters that I'm a fan of Baker Mayfield. He likes Baker Mayfield. And I think that was one of the bigger things and bigger confidence boost Baker needed. Because when Kevin Stefanski came in Cleveland during Baker's last year there, I mean, they didn't like each other. It was just, you could just tell they did not like each other at all. And I think that was kind of what Baker Mayfield's setback was throughout the season. Throughout that season with them, obviously he was injured, but it was just, Kevin Stefanski did not believe in him. And then same thing with Matt Rule. They put him in a bad situation with a really bad team, and Matt Rule just he was not supposed, not the head coach that they needed, and he just didn't have anyone that believed in him. And I think Sean McVay saying, I like Baker Mayfield, and now he believes in him. Now his confidence is boosted back up, and he helped drop 51 points on the Broncos. And before everyone says, well, it's the Denver Broncos. Actually, the Broncos secondary is one of the best secondaries in the NFL, actually. That's one of their bright sides on that horrible, chaotic team, is their defensive secondary. Patrick Surtain is a beast leading that secondary core. So it's not like they're scrubs. It isn't. But Baker Mayfield was able to pass all over that defense. I believe that what they did was, obviously, they play like a lot of man or a lot of zone. So the wide receivers, and this is where Sean McVay is just an offensive-minded coach. Instead of, well, I'm not going to take the risk with my wide receivers. They may not be able to beat corners like Patrick Surtain in that defense. So I'm going to make them bait, give Tyler Higbee the ball and make him go up against make them go tackle a tight end. And that's why Tyler Higbee had a great game. Cam Akers, ran the ball all over that defense, and Sean McVay was just a better coach in that game and help set Baker Mayfield up to be successful. He didn't. It wasn't like Carolina where they put him in probably in bad situations, or in situations where they should have won the game, like the couple instances in the beginning where receivers weren't catching the ball, they were dropping it in the end zone, they were dropping the first down markers, or something crazy happened with a ref and made them lose the game. Now I think Baker Mayfield's in a spot that he likes. He likes being in LA. He likes Sean McVay. Sean McVay believes in him. So now they have a pretty good backup quarterback for Matthew Stafford in case anything happens to Stafford next season. So I'm very excited to see what the future holds for Baker Mayfield. But they pulled off the win against the Denver Broncos, 51-14. Now the last game, Sunday Night Football, the Buccaneers and the Cardinals. The Buccaneers would end up winning 19-16. I believe it was an overtime. Tom Brady. Thomas Patrick Edward Brady Jr. He passed for 32 for 48, 281 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. There isn't an explanation for this. He is not good. He just isn't. I understand he pulled the win. He was able to pull off the win. I get that. He did it earlier this season too. But he's also, also been part of the problem on why they should not be in the situation. He was going up against not Kyler Murray. He wasn't going up against Colt McCoy. He was going up against Trace McSorley, who's never started in the NFL. That was his first NFL start. And Trace McSorley was 24 for 45, 217 yards, and 1 interception. I believe James Conner had a pretty big touchdown earlier in that game. So he was, the Buccaneers are not a good team, but they were struggling against an even worse team in the Arizona Cardinals, who were supposed to be, this really great NFL team, but kind of like, I believe, like the Denver Broncos, they just crumbled. And he was struggling against a really bad team. And that's not good for Brady. I understand he pulled off the win. They went to OT. They finished him off. Fine, I'll give people that one. But you cannot struggle against a horrible team. When a team is not up to your play and you guys know you're better than them, you should not be struggling. The running game was non-existent. Nobody ran for, I believe it was 80, like over 80 yards or 90 yards. No one cracked 100. I believe Leonard Fournette was the leading receiver in the game with 9 catches for 90 yards. Mike Evans wasn't very helpful in that game. Scotty Miller not being good. Julio Jones is a shell of himself. And the Buccaneers are not looking good. They're not looking good heading into the playoffs, heading into the postseason. Now they have to go up against the Carolina Panthers and hope they beat them to clinch the division. And it's gonna be interesting this Sunday, but Brady needs to play better. Like, he needs to get his act together right now, because that is concerning. I thought, like, at least this game would be like kind of his, revenge or his little comeback, like, all right, let's have a good game, boost his confidence. But I think this just took away more of his confidence, because you are struggling against Trace McSorley and a really bad Arizona team who's probably, they may fire Cliff Kingsbury after the season. I'm not sure. I personally hope they don't. But they may fire Cliff Kingsbury. They didn't have Kyler Murray. D-Hop was taken out of the game. I believe the only one that made an impact on that Arizona team was James Conner. So the Buccaneers need to figure it out somehow, in some way. Brady needs to figure it out. That defense, who looked pretty scary in the beginning of the year, is just not looking like it anymore. Obviously, Arizona was able to move the ball against the Buccaneer defense. The wide receiver, the receivers and Brady are just not connecting. I'm not sure what it is. And I believe that one of the crazier things about this season is that Julio Jones doesn't actually practice because of his, he's very injury prone. So he doesn't practice a lot with Brady. And I believe Brady takes off Wednesdays because he's an older age man and he can, he's a little more fragile than other quarterbacks in the league right now. But I think that's becoming the problem. You need to practice. You need to get, in line with these wide receivers. Got to get reps, 7-on-7 drills, something, route tree with them. Because clearly that's becoming the problem, is that there's miscommunication with the wide receivers. The offense isn't figuring it out. And I think another thing that's kind of another issue with Todd Bowles being the head coach is that they're not making adjustments. I think that Brady was way too used to it with sorry about that, with Belichick with, adjustments. So with him having Belichick, and obviously Belichick's probably going to go down as one of the greatest coaches to ever coach the NFL, and great defensive minded. But another great thing about Belichick and that team that they had is that they were able to make adjustments throughout the game. When they saw that there was a blitz package that they didn't like, or maybe this play call works a little bit better against this zone, or this maybe let's try a trick play to get the wide receivers open. They were able to make those proper adjustments, and that's why they had so much success. With the New England Patriots, that's how Tom Brady was able to get his rings. But I think with Todd Bowles now, I think that's another issue is because they're clearly not making adjustments. They're hoping that Brady just goes off. Either Brady sinks or we're all gonna sink. I think that's the kind of the mindset that Todd Bowles has this season, and even with Bruce Arians, who coached Brady whenever they won the Super Bowl. I believe that he was able to make the adjustments that they needed, which is exactly what they did, and that's how they beat the Chiefs. But now with him gone, Todd Bowles coming in, they don't make adjustments anymore. I don't know who's in charge of all that, whether it be him or the offensive coordinator, but they do not make adjustments as needed throughout the game. And you can see it because they're still struggling to move the ball. They were struggling against an Arizona team that's not that good. They were struggling against other teams that aren't good. And the Buccaneers are going to have a real hard time against these playoff teams come January if they're not making the proper adjustments. So the Buccaneers, congratulations to you guys for beating the Arizona Cardinals, but you're gonna have to figure it out because playoffs is right around the corner, and the Carolina Panthers are at your doorstep, ready to burst through and kick you out to be able to get into the playoffs. So, all right, so let's move on to the last segment of the podcast, which is game picks. So first off, I'm gonna start with the NFL, and then I'm gonna move on over to the college football playoffs and who I think is gonna go to the national title and who's going to win the national championship. All right, so for the first Thursday night game, the Cowboys are going to go up against the Tennessee Titans. I have the Cowboys winning this one. I know Derrick Henry might rush for 100 yards, but if Ryan Tannehill's not going to play and if Malik Willis is not going to play as well as he's supposed to, I like the Cowboys' chances. They have a little confidence, going into this game. Let's finish the year off strong and let's try to catch the Philadelphia Eagles. Hopefully they lose, but we're going to have to see. But I got the Cowboys winning in primetime. It's actually probably more of the better primetime games that they've played, that they showed this year. Now we're going on the Sunday games. The Dolphins and the Patriots. The Dolphins were coming off a bad loss against the Packers, but you know what? I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it just because the Dolphins are not playing good right now. They kind of lost to the Green Bay Packers. I'll give it to the Patriots. I'm going to give the Patriots it. I think that they're going to try to make that final push to get into the playoffs, and this is the game that they need right now, and Belichick is going to try to get his team into playoff contention. Just Matt Patricia needs to stop running the ball and halfback screens, but I'll give the Patriots in a close game. Next up, we got the Cardinals and the Falcons. I'm gonna give it to the Falcons. They're both not really good teams, but I think the Falcons have more than enough to get the win against the Cardinals. Next up, the Bears and the Lions. I got the Lions winning this one. Jared Goff's probably gonna have another great game. That defense of the Chicago Bears is just not as good as it used to be, and aside of Justin Fields, they don't really have any other talent. So give me the Lions in that one. Next up, the Denver Broncos against the Kansas City Chiefs. It's kind of a no-brainer there. I got Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. They're probably going to drop 50 points. Because if Baker Mayfield can drop 51 points after just being there for 3 weeks, I am more terrified of what the Chiefs may do with Patrick Mahomes. So give me the Chiefs on that game. The Indianapolis Colts and the Giants. Give me the New York City Saquon Barkley's, because they will go as far as Saquon Barkley will take them. Give me the Giants in that game. Next up, the Saints and the Eagles. I'm going to put my faith in New Orleans. Let's go Saints. I have them beating the Philadelphia Eagles. If Gardner Minshew is going again, I'm going to hope that the New Orleans Saints can pull off the upset against the Eagles. I know they're hurting right now. Maybe their confidence is a little low. Got a little piece of humble pie that they can be beat. They're not invincible, and now maybe that Saints defense can see a little bit of a loophole and stop the Philadelphia Eagles. So I got the Saints with the upset in that one. Next up, we got the Browns and the Commanders. I'm going to give it to the Commanders just because they're going to start Carson Wentz this week over Taylor Heineke. Maybe a little change of scenery, give Carson Wentz another shot. I just don't think the Browns are going to be good enough to beat the Commanders. And I believe Chase Young's supposed to come back. Don't quote me on this. I believe he's supposed to come back this week or next week. But if he comes back, that defense just got a whole lot better. Hands down. And Deshaun Watson, he's just not playing well. And I kind of predicted that. You've been out of football for a couple years. You're not going to be good. So I predicted that. I have the Commanders winning that one to keep their playoff hopes alive. Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Texans. Give me the Jacksonville Jaguars. They have a lot to lose, especially after just getting the number one spot in the AFC South. I believe they're going to continue on their hot streak. Trevor Lawrence is having a season this year. So give me Jacksonville, and they're playing at NRG Stadium, so they will be indoors compared to being outdoors. So give me the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence has another big game. The 49ers and the Raiders, I'm going to give it to the 49ers. It's going to be the battle of defenses. The Raiders do have a good enough defense to get by. Obviously, the 49ers has the best defense in the league right now. Brock Purdy is going to have a tough time, I think, against Max Crosby because they're actually going to play a legitimate defensive line. This is going to be, I believe, this is probably going to be his first test against an elite core in Max Crosby. Or I don't know if Chandler Jones is going to play because of that gruesome injury. But Perryman in the linebacking core. But I still have the 49ers. They have just way too many weapons and talent. Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, who's, as long as he stays healthy, Brock Purdy's weight and pressure that's on his shoulders is going to be lifted and probably put on Christian McCaffrey. But give me the 49ers against the Raiders. Next up, we got the Jets and the Seahawks. Mike White has been cleared, ladies and gentlemen, out there. Mike White has been cleared, so he's going to come back and be the saving grace for the New York Jets now, for and forever. It's going to be probably Mike White. The Seahawks are not playing good. Geno Smith is starting to look like Geno Smith that we know and how he's played. He's not playing up to the level that he was playing in the beginning of the year. Pete Carroll's starting to kind of crumble down a little bit. But give me the Jets with Mike White returning. He's going to go off again. And let's see. Next up, we got the Vikings and the Packers. I'm going to give it to the Vikings just because they're one of the hottest teams right now in the NFL, coming back 33-0 against the Indianapolis Colts. They beat the Giants this past week. And I know it's Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, and they're trying to make their push into the playoffs. But give me the Minnesota Vikings for that game. Next up, the Rams and the Chargers, the battle for LA. Either Justin Herbert or Baker Mayfield. I am sticking with my guy, Baker Mayfield. Give me him over the Chargers. And I think the Chargers have a little bit more to lose. The Rams don't. They're already eliminated. There's nothing more that they can do to get into the playoffs. There isn't. Mathematically, they cannot get in. So they have nothing to lose, and they're just playing the play now. But the Chargers have a lot to lose. And this is where, like I said in my argument, that Justin Herbert, even though he's having great numbers, I believe, one of his armband and his towel are going to the Hall of Fame because he passed for 4,000 yards in a couple seasons. He's having good records, but he's not winning games, and he's not winning them where it counts. So I'm going to give it to Baker Mayfield and the LA Rams. They are going to win the battle for Los Angeles. And then next up, we got Pittsburgh and the Ravens. I know Pittsburgh's coming off a great win against the Raiders, but I'm going to give it to the Ravens just because they're kind of figuring it out with their new quarterback until Lamar Jackson returns. So I think they have a little bit more confidence in Huntley right now. Pickett's still trying to figure it out with Pickens, so we're gonna have to wait for to see like what happens with Pickett, maybe in a couple years. But give me the Ravens over the Pittsburgh Steelers for this week. And then next up, the Buccaneers and the Panthers. Who is gonna win that division? And that's a really close race. But I'm gonna give it to the Carolina Panthers. Like I said, Tom Brady is not playing like Tom Brady, and we've all seen it. So I'm gonna take Carolina Panthers. They just knocked off the Detroit Lions in a pretty spectacular way. Tom Brady struggled against the Arizona Cardinals, who did not have Kyler Murray or Colt McCoy. They started Trace McSorley, and he almost got outbeat by Trace McSorley. And I believe the Carolina Panthers won their last meeting against each other. So give me the Panthers. They're gonna try to take away the division from the Buccaneers. I believe the Carolina Panthers. Sam Darnold's doing pretty well, and that running game is doing spectacular. They're figuring it out. So give me the Carolina Panthers beating the Buccaneers. Now for Monday Night Football, I believe this is going to be one of the best matchups this week. The Buffalo Bills versus the Bengals. Now, it was a tough one. I'm not going to lie. This was a tough pick. But I'm going to go with Joe Shiesty, Joe Burrow. I got them beating the Bills. I think they have a great offense. Joe Mixon is back. Jamar Chase is going to play well going into the playoffs. And give me the Bengals. This is probably going to be a potential playoff matchup. So this is going to be a great game. Probably one of the better games we've gotten in Monday Night Football this season. But give me the Bengals in a close game against the Buffalo Bills. But alrighty, everyone, that'll wrap things up for this episode of CAV Sports Podcast. I will be uploading this episode to my YouTube channel at CAV Sports. And if you guys want to check out any other episodes you may have missed, make sure to check it out on that YouTube channel at CAV Sports. But thank you guys for tuning in and have a happy new year.